Before nations had names and before tribes were born, there was a struggle, raw, relentless, and written into the very soul of humanity. It began not on a battlefield, but in a womb. Two brothers wrestled in silence, their limbs entwined before their first breath, already vying for a destiny neither could yet comprehend. And when they emerged into the light, one clutched the other's heel as if to say, "You may go first, but I will not be left behind." That child was Jacob, born not just into a family, but into a divine drama of ambition, deception, and redemption that would shape the fate of a nation. His journey was no ordinary path. It was a crucible of faith, riddled with betrayal, divine encounters, and haunting questions. Can a man outrun the consequences of his past? Can the cunning become chosen? Can a deceiver be transformed into a patriarch? This is not just the story of Jacob. It is the story of every soul that has ever wrestled with God, with destiny, and with itself. And it begins with a heel, a hunger, and a promise. Jacob's birth was anything but ordinary. From the moment he entered the world, clutching his twin brother Esau's heel, it was clear that his life would be marked by struggle and ambition. This seemingly small act foreshadowed the cunning and resourcefulness that would define Jacob's character. His name itself, derived from the Hebrew word for heel or supplanter, hinted at the role he would play in his family's tumultuous history. The rivalry between Jacob and Esau was not just a matter of sibling competition. It was a clash of destinies, shaped by the favoritism of their parents. Isaac, their father, favored Esau, the rugged hunter, while Rebekah, their mother, doted on Jacob, the quieter, more calculating of the two. This imbalance of affection sowed seeds of discord that would grow into a harvest of conflict and deception. The tension in Isaac and Rebekah's household was palpable, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface of their daily lives. Esau, the firstborn, was entitled to the birthright, a privilege that included a double portion of the family's inheritance and the mantle of leadership. But Jacob, ever the opportunist, saw an opening. One day, when Esau returned from the field exhausted and famished, Jacob seized the moment. He offered his brother a bowl of stew in exchange for the birthright, a transaction that Esau, in his desperation, agreed to without hesitation. This act of barter was more than a simple trade. It was a calculated move that revealed Jacob's willingness to exploit even his own brother's weakness. The question lingered, was this a moment of divine providence, or merely the beginning of a web of deceit? Rebekah's favoritism toward Jacob was no secret, and it fueled the fire of resentment between the brothers. She saw in Jacob the qualities she valued: intelligence, patience, and a keen understanding of human nature. But her partiality came at a cost. It drove a wedge between her sons, turning their relationship into a battleground. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would test the limits of loyalty and love. Rebekah, perhaps sensing the inevitability of this clash, became an active participant in the unfolding drama. She devised a plan to ensure that Jacob, not Esau, would receive their father's blessing, a blessing that carried not only material wealth but also spiritual significance. The stakes were high, and the consequences would reverberate through generations. The day of reckoning arrived when Isaac, old and blind, prepared to bestow his blessing upon Esau. Rebekah, ever the strategist, saw her chance. She instructed Jacob to disguise himself as his brother, covering his smooth skin with goat hair, to mimic Esau's rugged appearance. The deception was audacious, a gamble that could unravel at any moment. Yet Jacob played his part flawlessly, presenting himself to his father as Esau and receiving the coveted blessing. When Esau discovered the betrayal, his rage was uncontrollable. He vowed to kill Jacob, forcing his brother to flee for his life. The family, once united by blood, was now fractured by deceit and vengeance. But was this the end of the story, or merely the beginning of a deeper, more profound journey? Jacob's flight from Esau's wrath marked the start of a transformative odyssey. Alone and vulnerable, he embarked on a path that would lead him to encounters with the divine, tests of faith, and moments of profound self-discovery. The cunning supplanter, who had once relied on deception to secure his future, would soon learn that true blessings could not be stolen. They had to be earned. The question remained, could Jacob reconcile with his past, or was he destined to wander forever, haunted by the consequences of his actions? The answers lay ahead, hidden in the twists and turns of a journey that would redefine not only his destiny but the fate of an entire nation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren landscape as Esau stumbled into the camp, his breath ragged and his body weakened from days of relentless hunting. The scent of stew, rich, savory, and intoxicating, wafted through the air, teasing his empty stomach. Jacob, ever the quiet observer, stirred the pot with deliberate slowness, his eyes flickering with a cunning light. He had seen his brother's desperation from afar, and now, as Esau collapsed at his feet, the moment was ripe. "Give me some of that red stew," Esau demanded, his voice hoarse. Jacob paused, letting the silence stretch, savoring the power he held over his famished sibling. "First, sell me your birthright," he replied, his tone deceptively casual. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Esau, driven by hunger and impulsiveness, scoffed. "What good is a birthright to a starving man?" he muttered, sealing his fate with a careless wave of his hand. The exchange was swift, almost anticlimactic in its simplicity. Jacob handed over the bowl of stew, his fingers brushing against Esau's as if sealing an unspoken pact. The broth was hot, the meat tender, but the taste was bitter with the weight of what had just transpired. Esau devoured the meal, his hunger momentarily sated, yet his soul left hollow. Jacob, meanwhile, retreated into the shadows, his mind already racing with the implications of his victory. The birthright, the promise of inheritance, of divine favor, of a legacy, was now his. But at what cost? The brothers' bond, already fragile, had been fractured irreparably, and yet Jacob's ambition burned brighter than any remorse. He had played his hand masterfully, but the game was far from over. As night fell, the camp grew quiet, save for the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of the wind. Esau, now sated but restless, stared into the flames, his thoughts a whirlwind of regret and denial. He had traded his future for a fleeting moment of satisfaction, a decision he would come to rue with every passing day. Jacob, on the other hand, lay awake, his heart pounding with a mix of triumph and unease. The birthright was his, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Would his father, Isaac, ever accept this betrayal? Would Esau seek revenge? The questions gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside, focusing instead on the prize he had secured. The seeds of destiny had been sown, and the harvest would be anything but predictable. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between the brothers grew palpable. Esau's resentment festered like an open wound, his every glance at Jacob dripping with accusation. Jacob, ever the strategist, kept his distance, biding his time. He knew that the birthright was only the first step. The true test lay in securing their father's blessing. The thought consumed him, driving him to meticulous planning. He would not let this opportunity slip through his fingers. Meanwhile, Esau, blinded by his anger, failed to see the larger picture. His impulsiveness had cost him dearly, and now he was left scrambling for scraps of dignity. The brothers stood at a crossroads, their fates intertwined yet diverging rapidly. The question lingered: who would emerge victorious in this silent war of wills? The tale of Jacob and Esau is one of deception, ambition, and the irreversible consequences of a single moment's weakness. Jacob's cunning and Esau's impulsiveness collided in a clash that would echo through generations. The birthright, once a symbol of privilege and divine favor, became a pawn in a game of manipulation. And yet, the story is far from simple. Was Jacob truly the villain, or was he merely seizing an opportunity handed to him by his brothers? Recklessness? Did Esau deserve his fate, or was he a victim of his own hunger? The answers remain shrouded in the mists of time, leaving us to ponder the timeless lesson. In the heat of the moment, what are we willing to sacrifice for immediate gratification? And more importantly, at what cost? The dim light of the tent flickered as Rebecca leaned closer to Jacob, her voice a whisper of urgency. She had seen the future in a divine vision. Jacob was destined to carry the blessing meant for the firstborn, not Esau. The air was thick with tension as she laid out her plan, her words weaving a web of deception that would alter the course of their family forever. Jacob hesitated, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Could he really deceive his own father, the blind and aging Isaac? The stakes were unimaginable. The blessing was not just a father's favor, but a divine covenant, a legacy that would shape generations. Rebekah's eyes burned with determination. There was no turning back now. Isaac sat in his tent, his sight long gone, but his other senses sharpened by time. The smell of roasted meat filled the air, and his stomach growled. He had asked Esau to hunt and prepare his favorite dish, a final act of love before bestowing the blessing. But the voice that greeted him was not Esau's. It was Jacob's, disguised by the rough feel of goat hair on his arms and the scent of Esau's clothes. Isaac's fingers trembled as he reached out, confusion clouding his mind. Something felt amiss, yet the urgency of the moment pressed him forward. The words of the blessing spilled from his lips, sealing Jacob's fate and igniting a firestorm of consequences. Esau returned from the hunt, his muscles aching but his heart light with anticipation. He had prepared the meal with care, eager to receive his father's blessing. But as he entered the tent, the air turned icy. Isaac's face was pale, his voice trembling as he revealed the truth. Jacob had stolen the blessing. Esau's roar of fury shook the very foundations of the tent. Betrayal coursed through his veins like poison. He had been cheated, not just of a blessing, but of his birthright. His hands clenched into fists, his mind racing with thoughts of vengeance. The bond between the brothers was shattered, replaced by a chasm of hatred and resentment. Rebekah watched in silent horror as the consequences of her plan unfolded. Esau's rage was a tempest, threatening to consume everything in its path. She knew Jacob was no longer safe. With a mother's desperate love, she urged him to flee. To Haran, to her brother Laban's house. Jacob's journey would be fraught with danger, but it was his only chance. As he slipped away under the cover of night, the weight of his actions settled on his shoulders. He had the blessing, but at what cost? The road ahead was uncertain, and the shadow of his brother's wrath loomed large. Would he ever find redemption for his deceit? The story of the stolen blessing is more than a tale of betrayal. It is a turning point in Jacob's life, a moment that forced him to confront the consequences of his choices. His flight to Haran marked the beginning of a journey of self-discovery, where he would face trials, wrestle with angels, and ultimately transform into a man worthy of the blessing he had taken. But the question lingers: was the deception justified, or did it sow seeds of discord that would haunt his family for generations? The answer lies in the shadows of history, waiting to be uncovered. Life in Haran was anything but easy for Jacob. After fleeing from his brother Esau's wrath, he arrived in the land of his uncle Laban, seeking refuge and a future. Little did he know, the years ahead would test his patience, resilience, and faith in ways he could never have imagined. Laban, a shrewd and calculating man, saw an opportunity in Jacob's desperation. He offered him work, but the terms were far from fair. Jacob agreed to labor for 7 years to marry Rachel, Laban's younger daughter, whom he loved deeply. The years passed slowly, each day a step closer to his dream. Yet, when the time came, Laban deceived him, substituting Leah, Rachel's older sister, in the bridal tent. The betrayal cut deep, but Jacob's love for Rachel was unwavering. He agreed to another 7 years of labor, a testament to his determination and the lengths he would go for love. The deception Jacob faced was a bitter irony. He, who had once deceived his father Isaac to steal Esau's blessing, now found himself on the receiving end of a similar trick. The tables had turned, and the lesson was harsh. Yet, in this moment of despair, Jacob's story took a turn toward redemption. His marriages to Leah and Rachel, though born out of deceit, became the foundation of a family that would shape the course of history. Leah, though unloved at first, bore him many children, each a thread in the tapestry of divine providence. Rachel, the beloved, would later give birth to Joseph, a boy destined for greatness. The trials of Haran were not just about labor and love. They were about destiny unfolding in the most unexpected ways. The years in Haran were marked by both hardship and blessing. Jacob's flocks grew, his wealth increased, and his family expanded. Yet, the tension between him and Laban simmered beneath the surface. Laban's greed and deceit were a constant shadow, but Jacob's ingenuity and faith in God's promises kept him moving forward. The birth of each child, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and the others, was a reminder that even in exile, God was at work. The names Leah gave her sons reflected her longing for love and acceptance, while Rachel's struggle with barrenness added another layer of complexity to their story. Through it all, Jacob persevered, his eyes fixed on a future he could not yet see. The dynamics of Jacob's household were fraught with rivalry and longing. Leah and Rachel, sisters bound by blood but divided by love, competed for Jacob's affection and the honor of bearing his children. The tension between them was palpable, a reflection of the brokenness that sin had brought into the world. Yet, even in this brokenness, God's plan was unfolding. The 12 sons born to Jacob would become the 12 tribes of Israel, a nation chosen to carry the promise of redemption. The story of Haran was not just about Jacob's perseverance. It was about how God uses flawed people and messy situations to accomplish his purposes. The very deception that had wounded Jacob became the means through which God's promise to Abraham was being fulfilled. As Jacob's time in Haran drew to a close, the stage was set for a dramatic departure. Laban's hostility had grown, and Jacob knew it was time to return to the land of his fathers. But leaving would not be easy. The years of labor, the marriages, the children, all were tied to Haran in ways that could not be easily undone. Yet, God had spoken, and Jacob obeyed. The journey back would be fraught with danger, including a confrontation with Esau, the brother he had wronged. But Jacob was no longer the same man who had fled Canaan. He had been tested, refined, and blessed. The question lingered: would the brother who once sought his life now welcome him home? The answer lay ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, as Jacob stepped into the next chapter of his extraordinary journey. Jacob's dream of a stairway to heaven is one of the most enigmatic and profound moments in biblical narrative. As he lay his head on a stone in the wilderness, the veil between the earthly and the divine seemed to dissolve. Angels ascended and descended the ladder, their ethereal forms shimmering with celestial light, bridging the gap between humanity and the divine. This vision was not merely a dream but a revelation, a promise of God's unwavering presence in Jacob's life. The ladder symbolized a conduit of grace, a pathway for divine intervention, and a foreshadowing of Jacob's destiny. Yet what did this vision truly mean for a man who had spent his life grappling with deceit and ambition? Was it a call to transformation, or a reminder that even the most flawed among us are never beyond redemption? The wrestling match between Jacob and the mysterious angel at Peniel is a tale of struggle, both physical and spiritual. Under the cover of night, Jacob found himself locked in combat with a being whose identity remained shrouded in mystery. Was this a divine messenger, or God himself in human form? The battle raged until dawn, leaving Jacob forever marked, his hip dislocated, his body aching, yet his spirit unbroken. This encounter was no mere test of strength. It was a crucible of faith. Jacob refused to let go until he received a blessing, a testament to his tenacity and hunger for divine favor. But what does it mean to wrestle with the divine? Is it a metaphor for the human struggle with faith, or a literal confrontation with the unseen forces that shape our lives? The renaming of Jacob to Israel, he who struggles with God, was a pivotal moment in his spiritual journey. No longer would he be defined by his past deceptions or his earthly struggles. The new name carried a divine mandate, a calling to embody the faith and resilience of a nation yet unborn. This transformation was not instantaneous. It was the culmination of years of trials, betrayals, and divine encounters. Yet, the question lingers: why did God choose Jacob, a man of cunning and imperfection, to become the father of a chosen people? Was it to demonstrate that grace is not reserved for the righteous but extended to the broken, the flawed, and the desperate? Jacob's story is a tapestry of divine encounters, each thread woven with purpose and mystery. From the stairway to heaven to the wrestling match at Peniel, these moments were not isolated events but chapters in a larger narrative of redemption. They reveal a God who meets us in our darkest hours, who transforms our struggles into blessings, and who renames us according to our destiny. But what does this mean for us today? Are we, like Jacob, called to wrestle with the divine until we receive our blessing? Are our own dreams and visions gateways to deeper spiritual truths, or are they merely fleeting glimpses of a reality beyond our comprehension? The enduring presence of God in Jacob's life is a testament to the relentless pursuit of the divine for humanity. Despite Jacob's flaws, God remained faithful, guiding him through trials and triumphs alike. This narrative challenges us to consider our own encounters with the divine. Do we recognize the moments when heaven touches earth in our lives? Are we willing to wrestle with our doubts, our fears, and our past until we emerge transformed? Jacob's story does not end with his renaming. It is an invitation, a call to each of us to seek our own divine encounters, to climb the stairway of faith, and to emerge on the other side, forever changed. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain as Jacob stood at the edge of the wilderness, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. Years had passed since he had last seen his brother Esau, and the memory of their bitter parting weighed heavily on his mind. The stolen blessing, the deception, the anger, it all seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the scars remained. Jacob had spent years running, building a life for himself, but now, as he prepared to face Esau once more, he wondered if the wounds of the past could ever truly heal. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of the wind felt like a whisper of the past, urging him forward into the unknown. As Jacob's caravan moved slowly toward the meeting place, his mind raced with questions. Would Esau still harbor resentment? Would he seek revenge for the wrongs of their youth? Jacob had sent messengers ahead with gifts, a gesture of peace. But the silence that followed was deafening. The night before the encounter, Jacob wrestled with an unseen force, a struggle that left him forever changed, marked by a limp and a new name, Israel. It was as if the divine had prepared him for this moment, stripping away his pride and filling him with humility. The dawn broke, and with it came the realization that this meeting was not just about reconciliation with Esau, but a reckoning with his own past. The moment arrived. In the distance, a cloud of dust signaled the approach of Esau and his men. Jacob's breath caught in his throat as he saw his brother for the first time in decades. Esau was no longer the impulsive young man he remembered. Time had etched lines of wisdom and strength into his face. To Jacob's astonishment, Esau ran toward him, not with anger, but with open arms. The embrace was fierce, a collision of emotions that left both men trembling. Tears streamed down their faces as the weight of years of separation dissolved in an instant. It was a moment of pure, unscripted grace, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of familial bonds. The brothers stood back, studying each other, their eyes searching for the boys they had once been. Esau's voice, now deep and weathered, broke the silence. "Who are these with you?" he asked, gesturing to Jacob's family. Jacob introduced his wives and children, each name a reminder of the life he had built away from home. Esau's gaze softened as he looked at the children, and in that moment, the past seemed to fade into irrelevance. The future, not the past, was what mattered now. The two men spoke of their lives, their losses, and their triumphs, their words weaving a tapestry of shared history and newfound understanding. As the day wore on, Jacob insisted that Esau accept his gifts, a symbolic gesture of restitution. Esau hesitated at first, reluctant to take what he no longer felt was owed to him. But Jacob's insistence was firm. This was not about debt, but about love. The exchange was a closing of a chapter, a final release of the old grievances that had once torn them apart. When the time came to part ways, there was no bitterness, only a quiet promise to meet again. Jacob watched as Esau and his men disappeared into the horizon, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The reconciliation was complete, a divine orchestration of healing and redemption. But as Jacob turned to continue his journey, he couldn't help but wonder, what other trials lay ahead, and would he face them with the same courage? The trials of Jacob, a patriarch whose life was marked by both divine favor and profound suffering, began long before the harrowing events involving his children. His favoritism toward Joseph, the son of his beloved Rachel, sowed seeds of discord. Among his other sons, a tension that would later erupt into violence and betrayal. The violation of Dinah, Jacob's only daughter, by Shechem, a prince of the land, was a devastating blow to the family. This act of brutality not only dishonored Dinah but also exposed the fragile unity of Jacob's household. When Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took revenge by slaughtering Shechem and his people, Jacob's grief deepened, for their actions threatened the family's survival in a land where they were strangers. The consequences of favoritism and unchecked emotions were laid bare, revealing how deeply sin could fracture even a family chosen by God. The presumed death of Joseph, orchestrated by his jealous brothers, was the culmination of years of resentment. Thrown into a pit and sold into slavery, Joseph's disappearance left Jacob inconsolable. The brothers, consumed by guilt, spun a tale of Joseph's demise, presenting his bloodied robe as proof. Jacob's sorrow was unrelenting. He refused to be comforted, mourning the loss of the son he cherished above all others. This tragedy underscored the destructive power of envy and the far-reaching consequences of parental favoritism. Yet, unbeknownst to Jacob, God was weaving a greater narrative, one of redemption and reconciliation. Joseph's suffering in Egypt would eventually become the means of salvation for his family, though the path to that revelation was fraught with pain. Amid the chaos, Jacob's faith was tested like never before. The man who had once wrestled with God and received a new name now wrestled with despair. His trials mirrored those of his forefathers, Abraham and Isaac, who also faced unimaginable losses. Yet, Jacob's story diverged in its rawness. His flaws were laid bare for all to see. His favoritism, his passivity in the face of Dinah's violation, and his inability to see the truth behind Joseph's disappearance all revealed a man grappling with his humanity. Still, Jacob's faith, though shaken, was not extinguished. He clung to the promises God had made to him, even when the circumstances seemed to contradict them. His resilience in the face of suffering became a testament to the enduring nature of divine covenant. The family's trials did not end with Joseph's disappearance. Famine struck the land, forcing Jacob to send his sons to Egypt for food. Little did he know that this journey would lead to an unexpected reunion with Joseph, now a powerful ruler. In Pharaoh's court, the brothers, unaware of Joseph's true identity, stood before him as supplicants, their past sins looming over them. Joseph's tests, accusing them of espionage, demanding Benjamin's presence, were not acts of vengeance, but a means to probe their hearts. Had they changed? Could they be trusted? The tension was palpable as Joseph's emotions warred between justice and mercy. Meanwhile, Jacob, still grieving, faced another agonizing decision: to send Benjamin, his youngest son, into the unknown. The resolution of Jacob's trials came with a revelation that defied all expectations. Joseph's disclosure of his identity to his brothers was a moment of unparalleled emotional intensity. Tears flowed freely as the past was laid bare, and forgiveness became the bridge to reconciliation. Jacob, reunited with his long-lost son, saw the hand of God in his suffering. The family, once fractured by sin, was restored through grace. Yet, the story leaves us with lingering questions. How does one navigate the scars of betrayal? Can favoritism ever be justified? And what does it mean to trust God when the road is shrouded in darkness? Jacob's journey reminds us that faith is not the absence of trials, but the courage to endure them, knowing that even in the darkest valleys, redemption awaits. In the twilight of his life, Jacob, the patriarch whose name had once been synonymous with struggle and transformation, found himself in the foreign land of Egypt. His final years were marked by a quiet dignity, a stark contrast to the tumultuous decades that had defined his earlier existence. Surrounded by his 12 sons and their families, Jacob became the living bridge between the promises of God and the future of a nation yet unborn. His presence in Egypt was no accident. It was the culmination of a divine plan, one that had begun. with his grandfather Abraham and would extend far beyond his own mortal days. The weight of his legacy pressed upon him, and as his strength waned, his mind turned to the blessings he would bestow upon his sons, blessings that were not mere words but prophetic declarations of destiny. The scene of Jacob blessing his sons was one of profound solemnity. Gathered around his bed, the 12 men who would become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel listened intently as their father spoke. Each blessing was tailored, a reflection of the son's character and the role his descendants would play in the unfolding story of God's people. For Reuben, the firstborn, there was a mix of honor and rebuke. For Simeon and Levi, a warning of scattered strength. Judah, however, received a blessing that shimmered with royal promise. A scepter would not depart from his line, a foreshadowing of kings and, ultimately, the Messiah. The words were heavy with purpose, as if Jacob could see the tapestry of history unraveling before his eyes. Yet, even as Jacob spoke of the future, his thoughts drifted to the past. He longed for the land of Canaan, the place where his ancestors were buried and where God had promised his descendants would dwell. His final request to Joseph was not for wealth or comfort, but for a solemn oath. "Do not bury me in Egypt." The patriarch's desire to rest in the land of his fathers was a testament to his unshakable faith in God's promises. It was as if, in death, he sought to plant a seed of hope, a reminder to his children that Egypt was not their home and their story was far from over. The request was a whisper of the Exodus to come, a foreshadowing of the day when his descendants would return to the land flowing with milk and honey. The journey to Canaan for Jacob's burial was a spectacle of mourning and reverence. A great procession accompanied his body, a caravan of Egyptian officials, Hebrew mourners, and the sons who carried their father's remains back to the cave of Machpelah. The cave, purchased by Abraham generations earlier, had become the resting place of the patriarchs, Sarah and Abraham, Isaac and Rebekah, Leah, and now Jacob. The funeral rites were a blend of Egyptian pomp and Hebrew solemnity, a fitting tribute to a man who had straddled two worlds. Yet, beneath the grief, there was an unspoken understanding. This was not just the end of Jacob's life, but a reaffirmation of the covenant. The land of Canaan, though occupied by others, belonged to his descendants by divine right. Jacob's death marked the closing of an era, but it also ignited a spark of anticipation. His sons, now the bearers of his legacy, stood at the threshold of a future fraught with both promise and peril. The blessings he had spoken over them were like seeds planted in fertile soil, waiting for the right moment to sprout. And though they would face slavery and suffering in Egypt, the memory of their father's faith would sustain them. Jacob's burial in Canaan was more than a final resting place. It was a beacon, a reminder that God's promises endure beyond the grave. As the dust settled over the cave of Machpelah, one question lingered in the hearts of his descendants. When would the time come for them to claim their inheritance? And so, the story of Jacob comes to a close, not with the clamor of conquest, nor with the ease of comfort, but with a quiet, unyielding faith that reaches beyond the grave. Jacob was never the flawless hero of legend. He was flawed, torn, and human, just like us. He stumbled through deception, favoritism, heartbreak, and regret. But he held on to one thing that never wavered: the promise of God. What moves me most about Jacob's journey is not the dreams from heaven or the angels on the ladder. It's the raw, bleeding moments. The grief of a lost son. The silence of unanswered questions. The weight of consequences he could never take back. And yet, through it all, Jacob never let go of hope. Even when his hands trembled with age and sorrow, he kept reaching toward a future he would never live to see. At X Mystery, we believe this is not just ancient history. It's a mirror. Jacob's life reminds us that faith is not the absence of pain, but the courage to endure it without losing sight of the divine. It tells us that even the darkest chapters are part of a story still being written by a hand greater than ours. He died in Egypt, but his heart never left Canaan. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful legacy of all, to live for a promise so great it outlives you.
You just uncover a piece of this fascinating world, but many more surprises are waiting for you ahead. Click the subscribe button for each mystery today so we can continue this exciting journey together.